Hello and welcome everyone to this new video on Azure, and the topic for today is how to license Azure Site Recovery. Now, as we all know that the normal expectation from the IT infrastructure is that your application are always up and running because that's the way the business trends are, and that's what the customers they demand. And a lot of solution in the market which allows you to have high availability of application, and one of the option is Azure Site Recovery from Azure. Now there are different scenarios that can be used, but the one that I'm going to talk about here is if you want to fail over your application to Azure, what are the different costs you have to consider, and how you can utilize the Azure pricing calculator, because I know that when we talk about public cloud, a lot of people they have confusion how the pricing gonna work. So I will try to break that down so that it's easy for you to understand overall approximately how much it will be charged and how much will be the cost for using Azure Site Recovery as a high availability or a DR scenario option. So let's take a scenario, and as I said, we'll be failing over the machine to the Azure infrastructure. So we'll be using one of the region within Azure public cloud. So let's say that you have an on-prem infrastructure in which you have a couple of physical machine. You also have machine which are virtual machines. So I have a hypervisor and I have couple of VMs running on this, and this is my physical machine, right? So in this case, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to protect these three workload, 1, 2, and 3. And what I want to do is I want to fail over to Azure, right? You can choose any of the region that you want, and this is my on-prem infrastructure. So the one cost that you need to keep in mind is you'll be charged as per how many workloads, because you need to install the agents on all these machines that you're trying to protect. So say that this is a Linux machine that you want to protect. This machine is holding or hosting Active Directory. This machine is holding SQL database. So we are talking about three machines or three applications that we want to protect. So one cost that is pretty straightforward from the pricing calculator, which I will show you, is you'll be charged per workload that you're trying to protect, and it is approximately $30.19. And when I said $30.19, this is I'm talking about Canadian dollar, but you can always change what currency you're using. But $30.19 will be a flat rate per workload that you're trying to protect your application running on. Now that's one thing. The other thing that you need to consider is the storage part. So as we know that in Azure we need to create a storage account, and also when you're preparing the infrastructure for your Azure Site Recovery, you also need to create a storage account. And then there are two kind of storage account you can create. One is standard and the other one is premium. And depending upon what kind of storage account you will create, you will be charged for the storage. Now one thing that you need to keep in mind is that when I say storage standard account, it means that it is using a regular spinning hard drive, and when I say the premium, it means that it is using a solid state hard drive. But you won't be charged for any compute until unless you fail over, and unless you, even if you do a test failover scenario, you won't be charged for that compute charge for the virtual machine. You'll be just charged for the flat storage. So depending upon standard and premium, you'll be charged according to that. And another thing that you have to keep in mind is if you create a standard storage account, say for example this SQL database has a virtual machine which has 600 terabyte of storage on-prem, right? So what Azure will do when you create a storage account, it will create to the nearest capacity. So it will create a storage of 1 terabyte for you. So 1 terabyte of storage will be created for you in Azure, but you'll be charged only for 600 sorry, my mistake, I'm talking about 600 GB. So you'll be only uh, charged for 600 GB of storage in Azure, even though the storage which is carved out in Azure is 1 terabyte. Now that's one thing to consider because the storage cost comes into play. But if you're using a premium storage account, so say for example, this Active Directory or domain controller is having a storage on-prem which is say 70 gig 17 gigabyte, right? So when you create a premium storage account in Azure, it will map that to the nearest premium storage. And as you know that we have a different category in storage. We have P10, we have P20, P30, P40. So the P10 equates to 128 gig, right? So even if you have a storage of 70 gig on-prem, it will create that to the nearest premium storage in Azure, but you'll be charged for 128. It's the other way around from the standard. Even though you have carved out 1 TB in Azure Site Recovery, but you'll be charged for 600 GB, which is on-prem. But in premium storage, it's the other way around. Even if you have, say, 60 gig on-prem, you'll be charged for 128 gig because that's the closest you get within the storage. So let me just flip over to Azure Site Recovery pricing calculator. So as you can see, I'm on the pricing calculator. You can just Google that. And under the storage, we have to pick two things. So we have to pick site recovery and we'll pick storage because we are talking about two things, right? So let me just click on view. And if I scroll up, you can see that you can select the region. So let me select the region which is closest to me, but you have all these options available. So let me select Canada Central. And as I said, the scenario that we are talking about, we want to recover that to Azure. But if you want to recover to your own secondary DR site, you can do that too. For that one is 1945 per instance. But in our case, we want to recover to Azure or want to fail over to Azure. So it's around about $30.14. And let me just confirm I'm talking about Canadian dollar. So yes, it's Canadian dollar, so that's good. So if I move it to, say, if you want to protect one instance, I'll be charged 30.40. If I'm talking about say 2 instance, I'll be charged 6.80. So $30.14 per instance that I'll be charged. And as I said, the other cost that you need to consider is the storage. So let me just move it to Canada Central. And in my case, I'll select unmanaged disk, and if I select standard, there are two options of standard and premium. You'll be charged accordingly. So if I'm trying to protect, say, 1 TB, I'll be charged this much. And you have to also keep in mind the redundancy. So you can select from LRS, which is locally redundant storage, so creating 3 copies within one region. If you select GRS, we are talking about 3 copies per region. So in 2 regions in total, you'll be having 6 copies. And if you select RAGRS, which is read access geo redundant storage, you'll be still having 6 copies, but you also have the option of read access to the secondary region in case the primary region goes down. So that thing also you need to keep in mind what kind of redundancy you want. And on an average, if I look at, you see this is in total, I'm talking about in terms of pricing, and these pricing are monthly. So as I mentioned that you won't be charged for the compute until and unless you fail over your virtual machine, right? So you'll be just charged for the instance that you're trying to protect, which is $30 some change, and the storage that you have selected. But once you fail over, you'll be charged for the compute, which is a regular compute that you've done depending upon what kind of virtual machine. So say for example, this Linux server on-prem has close to 8 gig of RAM, and it is a 2 CPU processor, right? So what Azure Site Recovery will do it will map the on-prem, depending upon the load that you're running on this one, to the nearest virtual machine it is compatible with. So if I can tell you 8 gig and 2 CPU, the closest you can get is around about D2V2, D2 version 2 virtual machine. It will automatically map to that version of virtual machine within Azure Site Recovery, and you'll be charged for this in Azure when you failover, or even you doing the test failover. But in case you want to change the version of the virtual machine, that is also possible. So you can always go back to the Azure portal and you can change the version of virtual machine that you think you should be using. So you can move it higher up in the version, and you can also move it down in the series, whatever virtual machines options are available. So to summarize, the two things that you need to keep in mind is how many instances that you're trying to protect by using Azure Site Recovery. So you'll be charged per instance because you need to install the agent on that. And the second thing that you need to keep in mind is what kind of storage account you're using. So if you're using standard, it will map to that kind of storage, carve out that storage within Azure. If you're using premium, you'll be charged accordingly. And once you failover that machine, it will charge you to the nearest compute charges for that particular virtual machine that it has mapped from on-prem to Azure Site Recovery. But you can always change the version of the virtual machine that you want to use depending upon what kind of redundancy or what kind of infrastructure you prefer to have in Azure. So I hope this clears a little bit about how to license Azure Site Recovery in case you're looking for high availability or DR kind of solution for your on-prem infrastructure. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.